I'm Joe. I'm a compulsive eater. Um, I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the gray sheet. I commit them to my sponsor. I don't eat no matter what, and abstinence is the most important thing in my life. And it just so happens that I swung by the Watertown meeting, which is really my home community from Cambridge. And they have meetings on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And I just happened to swing in today and hear somebody that I've known for many, many years. And it was just, oh, it's just such a breath of fresh air. I just loved it so, so much. I'm reminded that back in the day, the reason why we said these mantras was because there were other people doing other things in the rooms. They were just doing different food plans at the time. And it was a way to distinguish ourselves from other people who were doing other things. Maybe they were eating different kinds of foods or they weren't doing the gray sheet. And a lot of back then, the meetings were commingled. And one of the qualifier from today's meeting said that she used to think that people who came here, that it was some kind of a cult. They would say, they're the mantra, and it was a cult, and she felt so sorry for them. Really a lot of contempt before investigation. But I was sort of thinking about that when she was saying it. And, you know, I was taught really early, like certain rituals around the food and around qualifying and like the meetings and so on and so forth. And it brought to mind a couple of just like just little things that I was thinking about. And, you know, one of the things is an elder in the community used to talk about, setting up her meal, and she would set up her meal on her table and she would say, something like, thank God for always giving me enough and never too much. And she would say that before every meal. And, I think part of like being in meetings and saying the mantra is just a habit, but it's like a very comforting habit that I really like to do it. Um, Many of you know my story, and my family of origin was a group of people who were compulsively eating, were many of them extremely overweight, and not a whole lot of judgment around being overweight. It was more like part of the family culture was to just, eat and then eat more and eat more and eat more and eat more. And I remember going to visit my Italian grandmother who was not overweight, but used to feed us constantly. And it was this constant mixed message of eat, 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 but you're fat, 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 And we used to go and see my little grandmother, and she would always have like a massive amount of food on the table. And I'll never forget it. Like, I think the whole crew of us must have put on a bunch of weight from the time she had seen us before. And I remember her saying to my mother outside in the driveway, "Look, you're you're blown up like balloons. You're all blown up like balloons." I remember her saying that. And I remember thinking like it was true. We were all blown up like balloons. And the last the last three of the children of my mom's side, my mom's family, were all the Italians. And we just got it by far the worst. After my dad died, I was only 4.5. My mom was pregnant with the last one, and the other one was only 7. So it was 7, 4, and in utero when my dad died. So the last 3 kids, there's a real genetic component. The parentes are really, really overweight. I mean, enormously overweight people. And I don't want to spend a lot of time taking other people's inventories or talking about them, but I just got back from Maine. I drove up there with my sister. I hung out with all my siblings. I had an amazing time. The vast majority of the conversation was all about our butts, our body sizes, what we're going to make, what are we going to eat, how are we going to have it, what's your best recipe, do you remember when we ate blah, blah, blah? Oh, they have this great restaurant here, da, da, da. It was a huge amount of the conversation. It was like How do you get your stomach so flat? What do you do to get to look like that? I wish I looked like you. I wish, whatever conversation you can have around food and body. And that was the culture that I grew up in. It was just, that was what it was like. And for me, because I was so fat, I really disassociated a lot of my own personal feelings from my body. Like I did not feel the feelings of being in my body. I just was like walking around with this, like basically like a giant cage around me, a big prison. And I was like bulking, sort of wandering around the world like that. I was not in touch with the misery at all, really. It was like I was miserable because I didn't have any friends. I was miserable because, nobody was ever going to love me. I was never going to get married. None of that was, I'm never going to have kids. Like none of that was even in the remotely close to anything that I thought would ever happen for me in my lifetime. And I would write like journals and journals and journals about like all the sadness and the self-pity and like all this stuff. I mean, it was just an endless slog of like all these things that I would say that were like outside of my grasp. Like I would never ever have any of that stuff. And I read some really brutal stuff when I was in high school and college about like my life, my body, like and my feelings. And I'll just wrap up this first part of my experience just by saying that I did not want to be on this planet anymore. It was not something I wanted to do. I didn't want to kill myself, but I sure as shit didn't want to wake up in the morning. I really didn't. And I would compulsively ate like just to solve some of the temporarily solved my problems. And it did temporarily solve my problems for a long time. It really protected me. It protected me from a lot of other things that could have happened to me. I was a very sort of naive person. I was desperate for love. My daddy died. I always wanted to replace him with everybody I ever met. I was very vulnerable to relationship messed upness. And ultimately, I think I was protected for a long time for being extremely overweight. So just really quickly, how I got here, it was a neighbor whose friend did the gray sheet who said, hey, you might want to go to this meeting in Harvard Square. I know this is what Susie H does. And Susie H was a beloved member of this community for a long time. And, he said, basically, I really think this could be something you could be interested in. And I just got in the car and went. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know it was a 12-step program or anything. And when I got there, I was by far the fattest person in the room. It was a packed room full of normal sized people. And they were all talking about food in a way that I never heard people talk about food in my life, ever. And what they were saying was, they were saying things like, this is an addiction, it's not your fault, your eating is not something you can control by willpower. You're allergic to this stuff. If you put it in your body, it's like a still, that the grains and the sugar, just like alcohol to an alcoholic. You can't eat this stuff because you feel compelled to eat more of the same. And they talked a lot about like the actual mechanism of abstinence. They talked a lot about like when you put boundaries around the amounts of food that you're eating, that's the one prong of the quantity piece. And then the quality stuff is just don't eat the stuff that makes you crazy. No man-made sugars and carbohydrates. Stay away from those things and put a boundary around the quantity. And that's the uniqueness of the gray sheet, that there's a lot of other like OA plans, but they eat, with exception in restaurants, or they get some of the grains, but Gray Sheet's the only low carbohydrate food plan that's a weighed and measured food plan that without exception, that's how we eat every day, all the time. And I grew up with people in that program that had like, at the time, it was a lot. It was a lot of years, 20 something years, it was a lot of years. Now it's like people get on the line and they have like 40 years. I'm like, holy shit, how old are you? I mean, it's so crazy. Or like the woman who qualified today is 33 years. I mean, I remember when she only had 10. I mean, it's crazy, right? But so that was the deal. And I listened to what people said. I also listened to people who were people pleasers, people aggravators. Thank you, Tess. Mean people, people that would steal other people's food. And I just felt like I identified with all of that stuff. And I started weighing and measuring my food. My last 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about the hope part, which is so exciting. Um, so I lost half my body weight in a year. It was not an easy time for me. It was extremely painful going from being a perfectly protected, really fat girl to being like a normal sized, attractive girl. And I did not trust the world anymore because of the way that people were nice to me. And I would be like, why are you being nice to me? Why are you opening the door? Why are you saying good morning? Why are you giving me your seat? I was a very dubious human being during that time. It was extremely difficult for me to adjust to being a normal sized person and allowing people in, allowing them to be nice to me. It was really hard. It was really hard. I did a lot of therapy around that, around my body. It was the first 5 years of therapy I did was all like body image stuff for years. And I did and once I got used to it all, I loved it. And I did a lot of things with my body and I was real happy with it. I was jumped out of planes and whitewater rafted and triathlons and long distance biking and dancing and getting involved in like contests. And I just did everything. And I went out with everybody, whoever asked me out, I went out with them. And it was a glorious time. It was like a really fun exploration. I rode the highest roller coasters on the up and down the East Coast. I just did everything. I backpacked like 5 days. I packed so much food in my backpack. I was like pumping in like 50, 60 pounds. It was crazy what I did with like all kinds of just long distance stuff. It was awesome. It was an awesome time. And, I dated around a little bit and then I dated really intentionally and I met my now husband. And at the time, he had a little girl and I fell in love with the little girl along with the guy. And I didn't know anything about step family dynamics. I did not realize that her ungrieved dead mother would be the reason why she would never want to bond with me. Like, and I tried and tried and tried and tried, and I did it for a decade. And it got so painful that I was able to go to trauma therapy and it saved my life. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Like trauma therapy was the best thing that ever happened to me because of my experience with Grace. The relentless rejection was so painful. It was the most painful thing I've ever been through, including, by the way, since I've been abstinent. My mother died right before I got abstinent. My sister died. My brother died. My sponsor of 15 years died. My like dearest friend, one of my dearest friends, Rachel, from when time when I was 20, she was 25-year friend, died of cancer, leaving two little kids. And I went through so many horrible, my father-in-law died. It just so many really, my auntie died. My other auntie died. Both my uncles died last year. Like I've been through so much shit, but I'm telling you, this Grace stuff was the hardest. It was the worst. It was like I'd show up to these meetings and I just thought I might actually die. But the truth is that I didn't. I totally forgot it was her birthday yesterday, which was like, I don't know if it makes me a bad person, but like, I actually am like surviving, like having this kid hate me. And I'm not actually dying. And, and the deal is that, now I live in Western Mass and I have like a job that drives me crazy, but it's a good job, like thank you. I get paid well for it, that's all good. And, it's a stable position. I adore my husband. I have two great dogs. I have a gorgeous property. I had a really fun little summer party at my house a couple weeks ago, and I have a hot tub that I hop in whenever it's cold enough to get in there, man. It's the greatest. But the most important thing, and I'll just wrap up with this, I know 30 seconds. The most important thing, that I do is I take I take care of my abstinence. My food is always first, no matter what. I always make sure I know I have a plan, I know what's going to happen, and I cook for myself. And I think it's really important for me personally to stay long-term abstinent is making sure that I'm making delicious food for myself. You know, the last thing I'll just say, and then I'll wrap up, is that I don't do this alone. I don't want anybody to listen to this qualification on the web and think somehow that like I have all this willpower or something. You know, I'm only as good as everybody else that's sitting in this meeting. Like I know that I have like a whole crew of people behind me every day that I can reach out to that are there for me all the time. And I also know that like my higher power that I choose to call God adores me. And I always keep getting the best of luck around the worst of things, you know, because, you know, what did Robin Williams say? He said, what of, oh no, I think this was Stephen Colbert. He said, what of life's greatest tragedies aren't blessings or something like that. And that's what I've learned is that, you know, you can flip anything around, you know. And those are that's my qualification. Okay. Thanks for asking me, Linda. That was awesome. Thank you.